They'll never admit it. They'll never look you in the eye and say, "You scare me," but you do, and you always have. You terrify them not because of what you say, but because of what you don't. Not because of what you show, but because of what you hide. Fear doesn't always scream, it whispers, and their silence around you is the loudest confession you'll ever hear. Watch them closely. The way their voices shift when you walk into the room. The way conversations change. Laughter softens, eyes dart. They pretend it's nothing, but it's everything. That's not comfort, it's caution. They measure their words around you like stepping on broken glass. They lower their tones, they fidget, they laugh a little too loudly. That's fear. Silent, disguised, unspoken, but real. People are cowards. They'll never admit what they feel. They'll laugh in your face, but the laughter cracks. They'll talk confidently, but their eyes betray them. They'll smile, but their bodies lean back as if protecting themselves. That's the truth. No one speaks. Fear doesn't need words. It's written in posture, in tone, in silence. And why do you terrify them? Because you're not like them. You don't play their game. You don't rush to fill the silence. You don't beg for approval. They can't read you, can't predict you, can't control you. And what people can't control, they fear. You see, the world thrives on masks. Everyone wears one, smiling, pretending, blending in. But you don't wear a mask. Or worse, you wear one so convincingly, they can't tell if it's real. And that unsettles them. They don't know if you're joking, if you're serious, if you're dangerous. And the unknown is terrifying. Fear isn't always about threats. It's about presence. Some people walk into a room and fade. You walk in and the air changes. Nobody says it, but they feel it. They adjust themselves. They notice you without wanting to. That's presence, that's power. And power always terrifies the powerless. They'll never admit it, but your silence scares them more than their noise ever scares you. Because silence is unpredictable. Silence makes them wonder, what's he thinking? What's he planning? What does he see in me? Their paranoia does the work for you. You don't have to say a word. Their imagination tortures them enough. And here's the cruel joke. You don't even try. You don't walk around thinking, I'll scare them. You just exist. You live. You carry your scars, your discipline, your defiance. And that alone is enough to make them tremble inside. Because your very existence reminds them of everything they are not. That's why they whisper. That's why they mock. That's why they avoid your eyes. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong. Stronger than their comfort, stronger than their illusions, stronger than the fragile masks they hide behind. And strength, true strength, terrifies the weak. The silent fear is the purest kind. It's not loud, it's not public. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, subtle, constant. It's in the way they pause before speaking to you. It's in the way they watch you out of the corner of their eye. It's in the way they talk about you when you're not there, but go quiet when you are. That silence is your crown. That fear is your proof. They'll never admit it. They'll smile, they'll laugh, they'll joke, but deep down they know. You terrify them, and you should. The eyes, windows to the soul or mirrors to fear. You've seen it. The way people avoid your gaze. They'll talk to you, laugh with you, even try to mock you, but they won't hold your eyes, not for long, because your eyes tell the truth they're desperate to hide, and the truth terrifies them. Why? Because eyes don't lie. Words can, smiles can, masks can, but the eyes betray everything. And when your eyes lock on theirs, they feel exposed, stripped, naked. You see what they don't want seen. You see the weakness behind the noise, the fear behind the bravado, the cracks behind the mask. That's power. Power without saying a single word. Look at how they shift. Look at how they glance away, pretending to look at something else. That's not confidence. That's survival. They can't hold your stare because your stare is weight. It presses on them, forces them to confront themselves. And most people can't handle that. They live their whole lives running from themselves. You force them to stop. That's why you terrify them. And here's the cruel twist. You don't even need to glare. You don't need anger. You don't need violence. Just stillness. Just presence. Just calm, unwavering eyes that don't flinch, don't break, don't dart away like theirs. That calmness is what breaks them, because calmness in the face of chaos is alien to the weak. They're jittery, restless, fidgeting. You, still. And stillness in the eyes feels like a storm in the soul. You terrify them because your eyes remind them of everything they are not. They don't have focus. They see it in you. They don't have discipline. They feel it in you. They don't have strength. They sense it in you. And it burns them. Your eyes are a mirror, and what they see in that mirror is cowardice. They'll never admit it. They'll look away instead. They'll joke. They'll smile. But deep down, they know. It's funny, isn't it? Everyone is tough until the eyes meet. Everyone is confident until silence drops and the gaze locks. That's when the truth spills out. That's when fear rises to the surface. That's when you realize you don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to flex. You don't need to fight. Just look, and the world trembles. Eye contact is dominance. The animal kingdom knows it. Wolves know it. Predators know it. Prey lower their eyes. Prey flinch. Prey submit. Humans are no different. They'll never say it, but when they can't hold your gaze, they've already confessed that you terrify them. That's why people laugh nervously around you. That's why they over-explain themselves. That's why they avoid sitting too close. It's not because you're cruel. It's because your eyes unsettle them. You don't even try. You just exist, and your existence exposes them. They'll call it arrogance. They'll call it intensity. They'll call it whatever makes them feel better. But the truth is simpler. They're scared. They're scared because your eyes are unbreakable and theirs are not. And the best part, you know it. You see it every day. The shifting, the stuttering, the laughter that doesn't sound real. You watch them squirm and you don't have to lift a finger. That's power. That's fear. That's why they'll never admit it. Mockery. That's their shield, their weapon, their disguise. They laugh at you, joke about you, whisper behind your back, and you think it's hate, but it's not. It's fear dressed up as laughter, because people never mock what they don't feel threatened by. They mock what unsettles them. They mock what terrifies them. And you terrify them. Listen carefully to the way they speak about you. The jokes come too fast, too often, too loud. That's not humor, it's defense. They laugh at your scars because they don't know how you survived them. They laugh at your silence because it unnerves them. They laugh at your ambition because it exposes their laziness. Their laughter isn't joy, it's panic. And panic always hides behind a smile. Mockery is the coward's confession. They can't admit they're scared of you, so they mask it with jokes. They can't admit they envy you, so they disguise it as laughter. They can't admit you unsettle them, so they turn you into a punchline. But here's the truth: if you were nothing, if you were weak, if you were irrelevant, they wouldn't waste their breath. Nobody mocks the harmless. They mock the dangerous, and you are dangerous, not because you hurt them, but because you remind them of everything they are not. Your discipline, your scars, your refusal to bend, it terrifies them. So they laugh, they whisper, they mock, because if they can turn you into a joke, they don't have to face the truth you represent. You are proof that they're small. You are proof that they're weak. You are proof that they chose comfort while you chose fire, and that truth burns them. It's ironic, isn't it? They spend so much energy mocking you, trying to tear you down, and in doing so, they prove your power. If you were nothing, they wouldn't bother. But they do. They gather, they whisper, they smirk. That's not hate, that's obsession. And obsession is always born from fear. Mockery is camouflage. It makes them feel safe. If they laugh at you, they can pretend they're above you. They can pretend they're stronger, wiser, untouchable. But it's all an act. Because when the laughter fades, when they're alone, when they face themselves, they remember you. They remember your eyes, your silence, your scars. And deep down, they know. They're mocking you because you terrify them. And the best part, you don't even need to respond. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to fight back. Because their mockery speaks louder than your silence ever could. Every laugh is proof of their fear. Every whisper is a confession. Every joke is a cry for help. They're not mocking you because you're weak. They're mocking you because you're strong. Stronger than they'll ever admit. Stronger than they'll ever be. So let them laugh. Let them joke. Let them whisper. Because behind every laugh is trembling. Behind every joke is envy. Behind every whisper is fear. And fear, real fear, always belongs to the weak. obedience. That's what the world wants from you. Sit down, shut up, follow the rules, be like everyone else. That's the script. That's the chain, that's the system. And most people obey without question. They wake up, they clock in, they bow their heads, they live like sheep. They think obedience keeps them safe. But safe is just another word for controlled. You terrify them because you refuse to obey. You don't kneel, you don't play along, you don't live by their script. And nothing unsettles people more than someone who cannot be controlled. They don't fear rebels with fists, they fear rebels with minds. They fear the ones who see through the circus, the ones who laugh at the rules, the ones who say, "No, I won't live by your lies." The system is a stage. School, jobs, politics, media, all props in a grand performance. They teach obedience disguised as education. Memorize, repeat, forget, don't question, don't challenge, don't think, just obey. Then they hand you a diploma and call you ready. Ready for what? Ready to obey more. Ready to work jobs you hate for people you don't respect, paying bills you can never escape. That's the script. That's the joke. And you terrify them because you refuse to play your part. Your refusal exposes the fraud. When you don't bow, you remind them they're bowing. When you don't follow, you remind them they're followers. When you break the rules, you remind them they never tried. And people hate reminders of their own cowardice. So they call you reckless, dangerous, arrogant. They label you so they don't have to admit the truth. They're scared. Obedience is comfort. It feels safe. The rules tell you what to do and you comply. No responsibility, no risk, no blame. If you fail, it's not your fault, it's the rules. That's why people love obedience. It frees them from thinking. It frees them from choice. It frees them from blame. But it also chains them. It keeps them small. It keeps them weak. And you terrify them because you've broken those chains. Think about it. How many people dream of freedom but still obey? How many complain about their jobs, their lives, their system, but still bow to it? Millions. They hate their cage but never leave it. You don't just leave it, you laugh at it. And that laugh cuts deeper than any rebellion, because it shows them the truth. The cage was always unlocked. They could have walked out anytime, but they didn't. You did, and that terrifies them. The obedient need you to obey too. Your defiance threatens their illusion. If one person breaks free, others might notice the door. If one person questions, others might wake up. And the system can't afford that. So they brand you a problem, a troublemaker, a misfit. Society doesn't fear criminals, it fears free thinkers. It fears those who refuse to kneel. Even in your silence, you're dangerous. You don't need to scream rebellion. Just existing outside their script unsettles them. Your refusal to obey makes them restless, paranoid. They whisper, they mock, they push. Not because you're wrong, but because you remind them they've spent their lives obeying. You're a mirror reflecting their chains. And they hate mirrors. They'll never admit it, but obedience is slavery. Comfortable, decorated, normalized slavery. They obey because they fear consequence. They fear being outcast, being punished, being different. You terrify them because you don't fear consequence. You fear mediocrity more. You fear wasted life more. You fear dying with chains more than living with scars. That difference makes you dangerous. And here's the twist. They want you to break. They want you to fail. They want you to crawl back, admit defeat, beg to be let back into their cage. Because your failure would comfort them. It would prove them right. It would make their obedience feel justified. But if you don't break, if you keep rising, keep defying, keep laughing, you destroy their illusion. You prove obedience was never safety. It was weakness. That's why they'll fight you. Not with fists, but with pressure, with shame, with whispers, with labels. They'll call you crazy, irresponsible, reckless. They'll try to paint you as a villain, because if they can't control you, they'll try to discredit you. That's the last defense of the obedient attack, what they fear. But you know better. You know obedience is a trap. You know the rules weren't made for your freedom. They were made for your compliance. And the moment you refuse, you win. You break the cycle. You terrify them, not because you're violent, not because you're loud, but because you're free. Freedom is frightening. Most don't want it. They say they do, but they don't. Freedom is responsibility. Freedom is risk. Freedom is pain. Most would rather obey than face that. but you embrace it. You laugh at the risk, you bleed with the pain, you carry the responsibility. And that's why you terrify them, because you've chosen what they never could. Your refusal to obey is your crown. It's your weapon, it's your fire. They'll never admit it, but it burns them. Every choice you make outside the script is a reminder that they're still trapped inside it. Every step you take toward freedom is a spotlight on their chains. Every laugh you let out in defiance is thunder in their ears. So keep refusing, keep breaking, keep laughing, because the obedient will never admit the truth, but you already know it. You terrify them, and you should. Silence, the most terrifying weapon of all. Louder than screams, sharper than insults, heavier than fists. People don't fear noise, they fear silence, because silence forces them to hear their own thoughts, to feel their own weakness, to face truths they've been running from. And you use silence without even trying. That's why you terrify them. Most people can't handle silence. They fill it with chatter, with laughter, with meaningless words. They panic when it lingers. They stutter, fidget, giggle, as if the absence of sound is a crime. But you sit in it, you hold it, you let it breathe, and in that quiet they crumble. Because silence is a mirror, and in it they see themselves. Your silence is not emptiness, it's weight. When you choose not to speak, when you choose not to respond, when you simply stare, the air thickens. They feel judged without you saying a word. They feel exposed without you lifting a finger. Your silence is pressure, and they're too weak to bear it. That's the secret. Silence terrifies because it's unpredictable. Words can be countered, explained, excused. But silence makes them wonder. What is he thinking? What does she know? What comes next? Their paranoia fills the void. They torture themselves with possibilities. You don't even have to attack, they attack themselves. And here's the irony, they call you quiet, distant, strange. They think your silence is weakness. But deep down, they know the truth. Silence is control. The one who can stay silent in chaos is the one who owns the chaos. The one who doesn't rush to speak is the one who doesn't need approval. The one who can sit in silence is the one who doesn't fear himself. That terrifies them, because they do. Silence exposes their masks. In noise, they hide behind jokes, behind chatter, behind endless words. In silence, the masks slip, the nervous tapping, the forced laughter. The shifting eyes, it all leaks out. You don't need to call them out. Your silence does the work. Your silence shows the truth. They're fragile, fake, afraid. Think of a room. Everyone talking, laughing, filling the air with sound. Then you walk in, calm, quiet, unbothered. You don't shout for attention. You don't compete with the noise. You just exist. And slowly, the noise shifts, the volume lowers, heads turn, voices fade. Why? Because silence commands more respect than noise ever could. Your silence bends the room without a single word. They'll never admit it, but silence scares them because it means control. When you don't respond to insults, you show they can't touch you. When you don't beg for approval, you show you don't need them. When you don't rush to explain yourself, you show confidence that shakes their own. Silence is dominance, and dominance terrifies. And the best part, silence makes them reveal themselves. Keep quiet long enough, and people confess things they never meant to. Keep still, and they explain themselves without being asked. Keep calm, and they stumble over their words, exposing every insecurity. You don't break them, they break themselves. Your silence is the knife, and they hand you the wound. But silence isn't just about others, it's about you. Silence means control of yourself. The weak speak because they fear being ignored. The weak ramble because they fear emptiness. The weak laugh because they fear judgment. But you don't fear silence. You've made peace with it. You've made it your ally. And that peace terrifies them because it's proof you don't need what they crave. They'll call you cold. They'll call you distant. They'll call you strange, but the truth is they fear the stillness you carry, because in your silence they see discipline, they see scars, they see someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't beg, doesn't bend. And that is power. Power they can't explain. Power they can't control. Power they'll never admit terrifies them. Noise is cheap. Anyone can scream, shout, laugh. But silence costs. It requires strength, patience, self-control. And strength terrifies the weak. That's why they fill the world with noise. Music blasting, screens glowing, endless chatter. because silence reveals the truth, and they're terrified of the truth. You carry it like a weapon. Think of battles, confrontations, arguments. The one who stays calm always wins. Not the loudest, not the angriest, the calmest. Because silence shows composure, and composure shows control. The louder they scream, the more desperate they look. The quieter you remain, the more terrifying you become. That's the paradox, that's the power. So they'll never admit it, but they fear your silence more than your words. Words they can argue with, silence they can't. Words they can dismiss, silence they can't ignore. Words fade, silence lingers, silence haunts. And here's the cruel laugh. Silence doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need to be justified. It doesn't need to be defended. It just exists, and in its existence, it terrifies. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to stay silent and let them destroy themselves. So use it, hold it, wield it. Let your silence be your roar, your blade, your crown. Let it unsettle the noisy, expose the fake, haunt the weak, because silence, true silence, is power, and power always terrifies. They'll never admit it. They'll laugh louder. They'll talk faster. They'll joke harder. But the cracks will show. Their eyes will dart. Their hands will fidget. Their voices will falter. And you'll know. You'll know the truth. They'll never confess. Your silence terrifies them. And it should. Scars, the stories your skin carries, the marks your soul refuses to hide. People pretend not to notice them, but they always do. Their eyes wander to them, even when their mouths stay shut. They see your scars and it unsettles them, because scars speak of battle survived, pain endured, storms conquered, and that terrifies them. Most people spend their lives hiding their wounds. They cover their pain with smiles, bury their struggles under distractions, mask their weakness with noise. They hide because they're ashamed of suffering. They think scars make them less. But you wear yours like armor. You don't cover them, you don't deny them, you carry them in the open, and that's what terrifies them, because scars are proof. Proof that pain didn't destroy you. Proof that you endured what would have broken them. Proof that you walked through fire and came back alive. Your scars remind them of their own fragility. They imagine themselves in your place, and they know they wouldn't have survived. That realization burns them. They'll never admit it, but every glance at your scars is a confession. He lived through something I could never endure. Scars are stories, but they're not tragedies, they're victories. Each one says, "This tried to kill me and it failed." And nothing terrifies people more than someone who cannot be killed by pain. They mock your scars, they joke, they whisper. But it's not mockery, it's fear. Because your scars remind them that life hits hard and most of them wouldn't last around. The world loves weakness. It celebrates comfort, worships ease, glorifies the untested. That's why scars disturb them. Scars are ugly, raw, real. Scars say, "I've been where you're too scared to go." Scars say, "I've faced demons you'd run from." Scars say, "I've died 1,000 times and still walked back into the light." And that unsettles them because they know their lives have been padded, protected, sheltered. They hide their pain because they fear judgment. You display yours because you don't fear anything. That difference terrifies them. Your scars make you unpredictable, unbreakable, untouchable. Because what can they threaten you with? Pain you've endured, worse, loss. You've survived it, shame. You've walked through it. The scars prove that every weapon they might use against you has already been tested and failed. Scars are strength, not the fake strength of muscles or loud words, but real strength. The kind built in fire, the kind earned in darkness, the kind that laughs at pain because it's already been paid. That's why they whisper about you, why they glance, why they fidget. Your scars remind them that their comfort is weakness. Your survival is their nightmare. And the irony, they call you damaged, they call you broken, they call you strange. But the truth, you're whole. They're the broken ones. They're the ones running from pain, hiding from scars, terrified of suffering. You faced it, you lived it, you carry it. You've been tempered like steel in a forge. They're still soft clay, crumbling under the slightest pressure. That's why they'll never admit the truth. Your scars unsettle them not because they see damage, but because they see resilience. Not because they see pain, but because they see power. power they'll never have, because they never dared to bleed. And here's the cruel laugh: scars never ask for permission. You don't choose them, they choose you. Life carves them into your flesh, into your heart, into your mind. Most people curse their scars, hide them, deny them. But you turn them into armor. You turn them into reminders that pain is not the end, but the beginning. And that transformation terrifies them, because it proves you've mastered what they still run from. In their eyes, scars are weakness. In your eyes, scars are strength. That contradiction unsettles them. They live in fear of being hurt, of being marked, of being scarred. You've already crossed that line. You've already paid that price. You're already free. And freedom, real freedom, terrifies the enslaved. Scars mean you've suffered. But more importantly, scars mean you've healed. You've been cut, broken, shattered, and you've rebuilt yourself stronger, harder, sharper. Every scar is proof of rebirth, proof that you didn't just survive, you transform. And transformation terrifies people because it reminds them that they've stayed the same. So let them whisper, let them laugh, let them stare. Their mockery is nothing but confession. Their jokes are nothing but fear. They'll never admit it, but every time they see your scars, they remember their own weakness, and they hate you for it. They hate you because you embody what they're too afraid to become. Scars are not curses, they're crowns. Crowns paid for in blood, in pain and struggle. Crowns that say, I've been broken, but I did not bow. I've been cut, but I did not crawl. I've been hurt, but I did not hide. They'll never admit it, but they envy your crown. They envy your scars, they envy your strength. And that's why you terrify them. Because scars don't make you fragile, they make you untouchable. And the untouchable always haunt the weak. Break, that's what the world expects you to do. They push, they prod, they mock, they pressure, because they believe everyone has a breaking point, and most do. One insult too many, one failure too heavy, one rejection too sharp. They bend, they fold, they collapse. That's the pattern, that's the script. But you're different, you don't break. And that terrifies them. You see, weakness is predictable. They know how to handle it. They know how to manipulate it. They know how to exploit it. But strength, the kind that doesn't bend, doesn't crack, doesn't beg, that's a threat. Because what do you do with someone who cannot be broken? What do you do with someone who's already walked through fire and came back laughing? That's why they'll never admit the truth. You terrify them, because you are unbreakable, and the unbreakable expose the fragility of everyone else. Think about it. Most people spend their lives avoiding pain. They build their routines, their comforts, their safe little cages to protect themselves. They crumble at failure, panic at loss, drown in rejection, their glass fragile, delicate, shattered by the smallest stone. But you've been hit with stones, bricks, storms, and you're still standing, scarred, maybe, hardened, yes, but unbroken, and that unsettles them more than anything. Because your survival is their nightmare. Your endurance is their confession. Every time they see you unshaken, unbowed, unmoved, they remember how easily they would have folded in your place. They laugh, they mock, they whisper, but inside, they're screaming, why hasn't he broken yet? Why hasn't she fallen? How is this possible? The truth is, people need others to break. It comforts them. It makes them feel normal. It justifies their own weakness. If everyone breaks, then their collapse isn't shameful. It's natural. But you ruin that illusion. You break the cycle by refusing to fold. And that makes you dangerous. Because if you don't break, you prove weakness is a choice, not destiny. That's why they test you. That's why they poke, prod, provoke. They're desperate to see a crack, one slip, one moment where you fold like they did. But the cracks don't come. You don't flinch. You don't bow. You don't bend. And the longer you stand, the more terrified they become. Because you prove that strength isn't impossible. It's just rare, and rarity is always feared. The unbreakable are unsettling because they've already faced what others avoid. Pain, loss, rejection, betrayal, things that would destroy most you've endured. And that endurance makes you untouchable. What can they threaten you with? You've already suffered worse. What can they take from you? You've already lost more. What can they use against you? You've already turned it into armor. And here's the cruel twist. They want to understand you, but they can't. Their minds can't comprehend endurance. They only know fragility. They only know folding. So when they see you laugh at pain, when they see you walk through storms with calm eyes, when they see you keep moving when others would crawl, they don't see a person. They see a monster, a threat, a mirror showing them their cowardice. That's why they whisper. That's why they mock. That's why they avoid your gaze. Not because you're broken, but because you're not. You terrify them because you prove strength is possible. And that means their weakness was always a choice. Unbreakable people change the air in a room. They don't have to speak. They don't have to move. Their presence alone unsettles the fragile. Because deep down the fragile know, if he survived that I wouldn't have. If she endured that, and that realization haunts them. The unbreakable walk differently, calm, steady, heavy with scars but light with freedom. Because once you've endured the worst, what's left to fear? Nothing. And a person with nothing to fear terrifies everyone still chained by fear. So they'll never admit it. They'll never say, you scare me because you don't break. They'll hide it behind laughter, behind whispers, behind silence. But their actions confess it. The nervous glances, the shifting tones, the subtle distance. They know you're unbreakable, and they can't stand it, because in the end, strength doesn't just protect you, it exposes them. Your unbreakable nature is a mirror reflecting their fragility, their fear, their surrender. And they hate you for it. They hate you because you are what they could have been, if only they hadn't broken. So keep standing, keep enduring, keep laughing at the storms. They'll never admit it, but your unbreakable spirit terrifies them, and it should. Whispers. That's how fear speaks when it's too cowardly to face you. They'll never say it to your face. They'll never confess what they feel when you walk into the room. Instead, they talk when you're gone. They whisper in corners, in shadows, behind doors. Not because you're weak, but because you terrify them. If you were nothing, if you were harmless, they'd ignore you. Indifference is the true sign of irrelevance. But you're never ignored. When you leave, they talk. When you walk in, they fall silent. That silence, followed by whispers, is proof enough. You disturb them. You haunt them. You live rent-free in their minds. Listen closely to whispers. They're louder than shouts. Whispers are where truth hides. People scream lies, but they whisper truth. And the truth is this: you unsettle them. You disrupt their comfort. You remind them of their cowardice, their mediocrity, their chains. They can't admit it outright, so they whisper, because whispers feel safe. Whispers let them pretend they're brave, when in reality, they're trembling. Whispers are weapons of the weak. They gather in groups, speak softly, smirk when you're not there. But the second you appear, their lips seal shut. Why? Because whispering is easy. Confrontation is not. They don't whisper because you're small. They whisper because they don't dare speak loudly. They don't dare meet your eyes. They don't dare face you. And that's all the proof you need. It's almost funny. They laugh about you. They invent stories. They twist your image. But always in the dark. Always behind your back. That's not hate, that's respect in disguise. Respect poisoned by envy, by fear, by weakness. They'll never admit it, but their whispers are confessions. Hate unsettles me. She intimidates me. They terrify me. Why do they whisper? Because speaking loud would make it real. To say it aloud would be to admit their fear. To admit that you dominate their thoughts. To admit that you hold a weight over them. So they hide it, they bury it, they dress it up as gossip. But gossip is just cowardly admiration, and whispers spread, like fire, like smoke, like a virus. One person whispers, then another, then a crowd. Your name passes through mouths like a secret too heavy to carry. They can't help it. They talk because they can't ignore you. They talk because you've branded yourself into their minds. They talk because silence about you would feel like surrender. But here's the cruel joke: whispers always betray the whisperer. When they lower their voice, when they look over their shoulder, when they lean closer to hide their words, they reveal more about themselves than about you. They reveal fear. They reveal insecurity. They reveal envy. Every whisper is not proof of your weakness, it's proof of theirs. The whispers are not about who you are. They're about who they aren't. Your presence exposes their lack of courage, their lack of discipline, their lack of strength, and that exposure burns. They can't face it, so they whisper about you instead. You're their excuse, you're their distraction, you're the shadow they project their fear onto, and deep down they hope you hear it. That's the secret. Whispers are made to leak. They want you to know they're talking. They want you unsettled. They want you angry. Because if you react, they win. They get proof that you're like them. Fragile, breakable, desperate for approval. But when you don't react, when you smile, when you remain silent, they collapse. Because then the truth is undeniable, you terrify them. And you don't even try. People whisper about storms. People whisper about fire. People whisper about monsters in the dark. They whisper because they're scared. And you've become their storm, their fire, their monster. They'll never admit it. But their whispers are screams in disguise. So let them whisper. Let them gather in corners. Let them tell stories. Let them smirk. Every whisper is proof. Every whisper is fear wrapped in words. And fear belongs to the weak. You terrify them. That's why they whisper. And you should. Isolation. That's the price of power. That's the toll no one warns you about. The moment you rise, the moment you refuse to kneel, the moment you break free from the noise, you're left alone. And that loneliness, that silence, that empty space around you, that's your crown. Heavy, cold, and terrifying. But it's yours. Most people fear isolation. They'll do anything to avoid it. They cling to company, to noise, to crowds, because solitude forces them to face themselves. And that's the last thing they want. They need distraction, they need chatter, they need the illusion of belonging. But you've walked away from the crowd. You've chosen silence over noise, truth over comfort, strength over company. That decision terrifies them, and it isolates you, because the crowd doesn't forgive rebellion. The moment you stop playing their games, they exile you. The moment you stop laughing at their shallow jokes, they call you different. The moment you stop wasting time with them, they call you cold. And the moment you refuse to bow, they call you arrogant. You don't leave them, they leave you. But here's the twist in leaving you, they crown you. Because isolation is not punishment, it's proof. Proof that you've outgrown them. Proof that you no longer belong to their world of comfort and cowardice. Proof that you terrify them enough to stand apart. The crown of isolation is heavy. It hurts at first. You feel the sting of silence, the ache of distance, the emptiness where laughter used to echo. But slowly you learn. You learn that silence is not emptiness, it's clarity. You learn that solitude is not weakness, it's strength. You learn that loneliness is not punishment, it's the training ground of kings. Because here's the cruel laugh, no empire was ever built in a crowd. No throne was ever forged in comfort. No crown was ever handed out in parties and chatter. Crowds create mediocrity. Isolation creates greatness, and the ones who mock you now, they'll never understand it. They'll never endure it. That's why you terrify them, because you carry the crown they're too weak to wear. Look at them, always together, always loud, always drowning in company. They can't sit alone for 5 minutes without reaching for their phones, without chasing noise, without numbing themselves. And yet, they'll call you strange for walking alone. They'll call you broken for sitting in silence. They'll call you dangerous for not needing them. But the truth is simple. The one who can't be alone is the weakest of all. Because if you can't face yourself, you can't face anything. You've faced yourself. You've sat in the silence, felt the weight, carried the crown. And that terrifies them because it proves you don't need them. You don't need their validation, their approval, their comfort. You've made peace with your own reflection. That peace makes you untouchable, and untouchable people always stand alone. But isolation doesn't just reveal strength, it filters weakness. When you rise, people fall away. Friends vanish, family distances, crowds disappear. Not because you hurt them, but because your growth exposes their stagnation. Your crown reminds them of their chains, and rather than face that truth, they flee. They call you arrogant, obsessed, lost. But deep down, they know the truth. You terrify them because you've embraced a loneliness they could never survive. And here's the beauty. Your isolation builds. While they waste their time clinging to each other, you sharpen your mind, strengthen your will, harden your soul. You build in silence. You grow in solitude. You bleed in the shadows. And when you finally emerge, when the crown of isolation glitters in the light, They'll act surprised. They'll pretend they never doubted you. They'll beg to stand beside you. But you'll remember, you built this alone. The crown of isolation is cursed and blessed. Cursed because it isolates you from the weak. Blessed because it connects you to the strong. Because once you carry it, you begin to find others like you. Not the crowd, not the chatter, but the rare few who also chose silence, who also embraced loneliness, who also carry crowns of their own. They are few, but they are real. And when kings meet, the world trembles. But before that meeting comes, you must endure the desert. The endless nights of silence, the whispers calling you strange, the loneliness pressing like a weight on your chest. That's the test. That's the fire. That's what forges the crown into your skull. Most people can't endure it. They crawl back to the crowd, back to the noise, back to the comfort of mediocrity. That's why most never wear the crown. That's why most never terrify anyone. Isolation is not for everyone. It's for the rare who can stand alone when the world laughs, the rare who can build when no one claps, the rare who can bleed when no one watches, the rare who don't need a crowd to feel alive. You are one of those rare, and that terrifies them because they know they could never endure what you endure. Your crown of isolation makes you dangerous because crowds can be controlled, but loners cannot. The system thrives on groups, on herds, on masses. It hates individuals who think alone, act alone, build alone, because you can't control someone who doesn't need approval. You can't silence someone who doesn't need applause. You can't break someone who's already at peace with being alone. That's why they fear you. That's why they whisper. That's why they call you dangerous, because you are. And the cruelest truth, the higher you rise, the lonelier it gets. The heavier the crown, the fewer who can bear its weight. Kings don't walk in crowds, they walk alone. And that isolation is both curse and blessing. Curse because you lose the comfort of belonging. Blessing because you gain the power of freedom. And freedom terrifies those who are still chained. So wear your crown. Carry it through the silence. Endure the whispers. Embrace the loneliness. Because the crown of isolation is not weakness, it's proof. Proof that you terrify them enough to stand apart. Proof that you are strong enough to survive what they never could. Proof that you are becoming something they'll never admit they fear untouchable. And one day, when your crown shines so bright it blinds them, they'll come crawling back. They'll beg to be near you, to be associated with you, to be lifted by you. But you'll remember the silence. You'll remember the whispers. You'll remember that you built this crown alone. And you'll smile because their fear was always the fuel. Their whispers were always the confessions. Their distance was always the proof. You terrify them, not because you hurt them, not because you chase them, but because you no longer need them. And in a world built on belonging, nothing is more terrifying than someone who stands alone. That's the crown of isolation. Heavy, cold, eternal, and it's yours. They'll never admit it. They'll never say it to your face. They'll never confess the thought that keeps them awake when the lights are off and the noise is gone. But the truth is simple. You terrify them. And not because of your voice, your fists, your scars. No, you terrify them because you are their mirror. That's the final truth, the deepest cut, the cruelest joke. You don't scare them because you're different. You scare them because you reflect everything they could have been, but chose not to be. You're a walking reminder of their cowardice, their laziness, their wasted time. And that truth, that's unbearable. Mirrors are uncomfortable. People love them when they flatter, when they show a polished smile, when they reflect back illusions. But real mirrors, the ones that expose the cracks, the dirt, the ugliness, those are despised. And that's what you are. A mirror that doesn't lie. A mirror that shows them their fragility, their mediocrity, their chains. They hate you because in your presence, they can't pretend. You strip away the mask, you expose the weakness. Your discipline shows their laziness. Your scars show their comfort. Your silence shows their noise. Your strength shows their fragility. Your refusal to break shows their surrender. Every move you make, every choice you take, every scar you carry, it all reflects what they could have been if they had chosen differently. And that's why you terrify them, because deep down, they know the truth. They had the same 24 hours, the same time, the same opportunities. But where you chose pain, they chose comfort. Where you chose silence, they chose distraction. Where you chose to rise, they chose to kneel. And now every time they see you, every time they whisper about you, every time they mock you, they're really screaming at themselves. That's the power of a mirror. It doesn't need to speak, it doesn't need to argue. It just reflects. And you, without trying, reflect their cowardice. That's why their laughter cracks. That's why their whispers spread. That's why their smiles falter. Because no one likes to face the truth that they are small, that they are weak, that they are nothing more than shadows of what they could have been. You terrify them because you survived what they couldn't. You endured storms they would have drowned in. You carried weights they would have dropped. You laughed through fires that would have consumed them. And now, standing in front of them, you are living proof that their excuses were lies. That's what burns. That's what eats them alive. You don't just reflect their weakness. You destroy their illusions. Think about it. Most people live in a world built on excuses. I couldn't because of this. I didn't because of that. It's not my fault. Excuses are their shield. Excuses make mediocrity bearable. But you exist without excuses. You carry scars instead, and your scars scream louder than their excuses ever could. I was broken, but I rose. I was cut, but I healed. I was beaten, but I endured. Your life invalidates their excuses. And nothing terrifies a coward more than realizing their excuses were just lies they told themselves to avoid pain. You're their mirror. You reflect the life they could have had, the strength they could have built, the fire they could have carried. And that's why they'll never admit it. To admit it would mean confessing that they wasted their chance, that they threw away their 20s, that they traded greatness for comfort, freedom for safety, power for chains. And no one wants to admit that. So instead they whisper, they mock, they laugh, they lie. But inside, they tremble, they envy, they break. Because every time they see you, they see themselves, the version of themselves they were too weak to become. And here's the cruel twist. You didn't choose to be their mirror. You didn't beg for it. You didn't force it. You just lived. You just endured. You just rose. But by doing so, you became something rare, something frightening, a reflection of what others could have been if only they weren't so afraid. And that reflection haunts them. Mirrors are merciless. They don't flatter. They don't comfort. They don't lie. And you terrify them because you are merciless. You don't bend to their illusions. You don't bow to their comfort. You don't play their game. You force them to face themselves, even when they'd rather drown in distraction. You're the silence in their noise, the scar in their smooth skin, the storm in their safe little sky. You are the reflection they cannot escape. That's why they'll call you arrogant. That's why they'll call you obsessed. That's why they'll try to paint you as dangerous, reckless, unstable. Because labeling you is easier than admitting the truth. Admitting the truth means admitting that they could have been like you, but chose not to. And that admission is death to their illusions. So they resist it, they run from it, they bury it. But no matter how deep they bury it, the reflection is still there. You are still there. And here's the final laugh: mirrors don't need acknowledgement to work. Whether they admit it or not, whether they confess it or not, every time they see you, they feel it. Every time they hear your name, they feel it. Every time your silence hangs heavy. Every time your scars glimmer. Every time your presence shifts the air, they feel it. They feel the fear, they feel the envy. They feel the reflection burning them alive. You terrify them because you're proof. Proof that their excuses were lies. Proof that their comfort was poison. Proof that their chains were chosen. Proof that strength is possible. That resilience is real, that unbreakable people exist. And that proof is unbearable, because it means they wasted everything. That's why they'll never admit it. They'll never look you in the eye and say, "You scare me because you show me what I should have been." They'll never confess, "You terrify me because you survived what I couldn't." They'll never whisper, "You haunt me because you reflect my cowardice." They'll never admit it, but you know. You see it in their eyes, their silence, their whispers. And that's the final truth. You are their mirror. You reflect their weakness, their wasted years, their mediocrity. You remind them that they chose chains when they could have chosen freedom. You terrify them because you prove that fear was never the enemy. It was their obedience to it. So wear it, own it, smile at it. Because being a mirror is not a curse, it's a crown. The crown of truth, the crown of scars, the crown of fear. They'll never admit it, but you already know. You terrify them, and you should.